I'm Evelyn Vance. When a medical crisis left me bedridden, my family thought I was an easy target. They spent months quietly plotting to strip away my wealth, my home, and even my freedom. They thought I was trapped, with nowhere left to turn. But they overlooked one fatal detail about my past. And by the time they realized who they were really dealing with, the trap was already sprung. Here is how playing the long game delivered the ultimate form of justice. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story of elegant revenge. And let me know in the comments below, where are you watching from today, and what time is it where you are?
Retiring to Palm Beach after 30 years as a federal financial crimes investigator was supposed to mean peace. I spent 3 decades tracing dirty money, unraveling shell companies, and putting fraudsters behind bars. My reward was a fully paid-off estate, a quiet life, and the satisfaction of a career well served. But retirement hit a snag 3 weeks ago when I underwent major spinal surgery. Bedridden, relying on temporary care, and moving at a snail's pace, I was physically vulnerable for the first time in my life. Mind-wise, however, I was as sharp as ever. That was the fraudster's first mistake. It was a humid Tuesday afternoon when the mail arrived. Sitting on my patio, propped up by specialized pillows, I flipped through the stack of letters. Most were standard medical bills. Then I saw an envelope from First Heritage Financial. It was addressed to me, marked urgent, and contained a formal monthly statement. I opened it, expecting a routine notice. Instead, my eyes landed on a line item that made my blood run cold before my training kicked in. Account balance, $450,000. Loan type, home equity conversion mortgage. Property address, my Palm Beach mansion. Someone had taken out a $450,000 reverse mortgage against my home, a property I bought outright 20 years ago with cash and held zero debt on. I didn't scream or cry. In my line of work, panic is a luxury you cannot afford.
I took a slow breath, laid the document flat, and dialed the toll-free number on the top corner. Within 2 minutes, I was connected to a loan representative named Marcus. First Heritage Financial. My name is Marcus. How can I assist you today? His scripted, cheerful voice chirped. Marcus, my name is Evelyn Vance, I said, keeping my voice deadpan and steady. I'm looking at a reverse mortgage statement for $450,000 on my home. I never applied for this loan. I want to know who authorized it. There was a pause, followed by keyboard clicks. I'm looking at the executed paperwork right now, Ms. Vance. The loan was approved 6 weeks ago. All documents were signed, notarized, and funds were dispersed according to the direct deposit instructions on file. I was in a hospital bed 6 weeks ago, preparing for spinal surgery, I replied sharply. I signed nothing. Send me copies of the executed closing packet, the notary acknowledgement, and the bank account details where those funds were wired, immediately. Ma'am, due to privacy regulations. Marcus, listen to me very carefully, I interrupted, dropping my tone. I spent 30 years as a senior federal agent investigating financial fraud. You are looking at an unauthorized, fraudulent transaction involving identity theft and wire fraud. If you don't email those files to my address within the hour, my next call is to the state attorney's office and the FBI. Am I making myself clear? Silence hung on the line. I'm transferring you to our fraud department right now, Ms. Vance, Marcus said, his cheerful tone gone. 10 minutes later, the documents landed in my inbox. I printed them out and examined the closing packet with a magnifying glass. The signature on the final page was a convincing forgery of my handwriting, but it wasn't mine. The notary stamp belonged to a local mobile service in Broward County, but the most telling detail was the destination account for the $450,000 payout, a newly opened personal account at a regional bank. The primary account holder name on that wire transfer made my jaw tighten. It was a name I recognized instantly. Someone close to me had capitalized on my surgery to steal my home. They thought I was a helpless old woman recovering in bed. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The name on the wire transfer record belonged to Victoria Vance, my late brother's wife.
3 weeks ago, right after my spinal surgery, Victoria appeared at my front door with tears in her eyes and suitcases in her hands. She insisted that family had to stick together during tough times. I was vulnerable, recovering, and temporarily relying on assistance, so I allowed her to stay in my guest suite. That was my mistake, but it was also the exact setup Victoria had been waiting for. While I was heavily medicated during my first week home, Victoria went to work. She raided my home office, stole my original deed, tax filings, and personal identification documents. But a fake signature on a reverse mortgage was only the opening move of her scheme. She had orchestrated something far more sinister to ensure I couldn't fight back legally. 2 days after I discovered the fraudulent loan, Victoria walked into my room without knocking. Following my surgery, she had convinced my temporary home care nurses that moving me out of the main mansion into the small one-bedroom carriage house at the rear of the property was safer for my mobility. I had complied at the time, wanting to avoid unnecessary conflict while physically weak. She stepped into my small living space carrying a manila folder, a fake smile plastered across her face. "Evelyn, dear," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "You shouldn't be stressing yourself with financial matters or bank statements anymore." I sat back on my daybed, keeping my posture relaxed and my face blank. "What are you talking about, Victoria?" "I had a meeting with a probate attorney and a court representative yesterday," she replied smoothly, setting a stack of paper on my table. "Given your recent memory lapses and physical decline, the court granted an emergency temporary conservatorship. I am officially your legal guardian and the executor of your entire estate." I picked up the document. It was a fraudulent conservatorship filing, complete with forged medical assessments stating I suffered from rapid-onset severe vascular dementia. She had bribed a corrupt medical evaluator to paint me as mentally incompetent. Under Florida law, if the court believed I had dementia, my legal rights were completely stripped. I couldn't sell my property, hire an attorney, or even access my own bank accounts. She had effectively locked me out of my own life and commandeered my multi-million-dollar estate. "You belong back here in the guest house where it's quiet and manageable," Victoria added, stepping toward the door. "I've already redirected your mail and frozen your primary accounts for your protection. Don't worry about a thing, Evelyn. I'll handle all your affairs from now on." "You've been very thorough, Victoria," I said quietly, deliberately letting my voice trail off as if I were confused, fragile, and utterly defeated. "It's for your own good, sweetie," she sneered softly before shutting the door behind her. As soon as the door clicked shut, my frail facade vanished. I stood up straight, ignoring the dull ache in my lower back. Victoria thought she had pulled off the ultimate hostile takeover. She believed she was dealing with an ailing, helpless old woman who would quietly fade away in a back room while she enjoyed my life's work. What Victoria didn't realize was that in financial crime investigation, establishing the full scope of the fraud is step 1. You don't strike when the criminal makes their first move. You let them build a tower of evidence so high that when it collapses, it buries them completely. She wanted my house, my money, and my freedom. I was going to play the long game and give her enough rope to hang herself. For the next 3 weeks, I played my assigned role to perfection. Every time Victoria or her guests glanced toward the carriage house, they saw a frail woman in an oversized sweater, sitting on the porch staring blankly into the yard. I spoke in slow, hesitant sentences whenever Victoria dropped off basic groceries, pretending to forget what day of the week it was. Victoria ate it up. Convinced that I was harmless and rapidly deteriorating, she stopped hiding her tracks entirely. While I played the helpless victim on the outside, my carriage house became a silent command center. My physical recovery was well ahead of schedule, and my mind was razor sharp. Using a backup laptop I had kept hidden in my luggage and my background in federal cyber forensics, I bypassed the administrative security on the main house Wi-Fi network. Within 48 hours, I had complete visibility over every device connected to my network, including Victoria's smartphone, tablet, and personal laptop.
Victoria spent money like someone who believed consequences no longer existed for her. She didn't just spend the $450,000 from the fraudulent reverse mortgage. She began draining my liquid savings accounts using her fake conservatorship authority. First came a high-performance luxury sports car delivered directly to my driveway. Then came a flurry of credit card charges, designer wardrobes, expensive dinners, and eventually a $50,000 wire transfer for a private jet charter to a luxury resort in Bali. The arrogance didn't end with her spending. Victoria turned my forced isolation into content for her social media followers. Sitting by my infinity pool, drinking my vintage wine, she recorded daily video blogs for thousands of online followers. Taking care of an aging relative with severe dementia is so draining, guys. She lied smoothly into her phone camera during one live stream, dabbing non-existent tears from her cheeks. Evelyn doesn't even recognize me half the time. But family comes first, even when it takes everything out of you.
I watched the live feed from my laptop screen, archiving the raw video files with precise time-stamped metadata. Every public statement she made, claiming I was mentally incapacitated, was another nail in her legal coffin, especially while I was quietly logging every single financial transaction she initiated. Through my network monitoring, I intercepted bank statements, wire transfer receipts, and encrypted email threads. I pulled the digital audit trail showing Victoria paying off the corrupt notary, a $5,000 cash deposit, into a private account 2 days before the reverse mortgage was finalized. I even captured clear audio files from her phone calls, where she openly bragged to her socialite friends about finally taking over the Palm Beach compound early. I compiled everything into a clean, unassailable digital evidence package: wire transfer logs, forensic signature analysis, video archives, and network data proving systematic wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. I categorized every document by its specific federal statutory violation under Title 18 of the United States Code. I made triple redundant backups on encrypted thumb drives, ensuring no remote attempt could wipe my findings. Victoria believed she was living a grand life at my expense, insulating herself behind a wall of fraudulent court orders and public sympathy. She thought she had effectively buried me in the back room of my own property. In reality, she was simply documenting her own federal crimes in real time, handing me every piece of evidence required to put her away for a very long time. My physical therapy was complete. My spine was healed, my body was strong, and my evidence file was airtight. Victoria had enjoyed her brief stint as the fake mistress of my estate. She thought she was playing a simple game of greed against a helpless old woman, completely unaware that she had stepped into a trap laid by a seasoned investigator. The investigation phase was officially closed. Now it was time to hand this case over to the authorities. With the evidence file locked and encrypted, I made one phone call. I bypassed standard emergency channels and dialed a private, unlisted number that very few people possessed. The line rang twice before a sharp, authoritative voice answered. "Samantha Cross," she said. "Sam, it's Evelyn Vance," I replied, my voice clear, steady, and devoid of emotion. I need federal authority, and I need it fast. Samantha had been my most trusted colleague during my decades at the Bureau, before she transitioned to senior trial attorney for the Department of Justice's Financial Crimes Division. She knew my analytical precision and understood that if I was calling her directly, the stakes were sky high. "Evelyn, word was you were recovering from spinal surgery down in Palm Beach," Sam said. Her tone instantly shifted to full professional alertness. "What's going on?" "I am fully recovered," I said coldly. "But while I was bedridden, my late brother's wife committed identity theft, forged a reverse mortgage for $450,000, bribe-patted a corrupt doctor to slap me with a fraudulent conservatorship, and is currently liquidating my assets from my main house." A heavy pause echoed across the line. "Tell me you have paper," Sam said calmly. "I have a bulletproof digital portfolio," I answered. "Forensic logs, intercepted wire transactions, corrupted notary payments, and clear audio recordings of her bragging on my own Wi-Fi network." I'm emailing the encrypted master bundle to your secure server right now. I click send on my workstation. For 3 tense minutes, silence stretched over the line while Sam accessed the encrypted drive and reviewed the forensic audit files on her desktop. I could hear the rapid clicking of her key commands as she analyzed the evidence. "My God, Evelyn," Sam finally spoke, her voice laced with sharp outrage. "This isn't just family greed. This is multi-jurisdictional wire fraud, bank fraud, aggravated identity theft, and federal money laundering. She's executed transactions across state lines using stolen credentials. Is it enough for federal warrants?" I asked, straight to the point. "It's enough to lock her away for a decade," Sam replied sharply. "The fake conservatorship is dead on arrival once federal judges see this medical fraud audit. But we need to execute this cleanly. If we move too casually, her defense team will try to stall using civil court filings. We need an inescapable trap," I stated. "She needs to be caught in full possession of the stolen assets, publicly exposed so there is no narrative her spin doctors can twist later." "What's her next move?" Sam asked. "She's throwing a massive, televised, glamorous Christmas gala at my mansion this weekend," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "She invited Palm Beach high society and intends to live stream the entire event to build her personal brand as a selfless caregiver."
She's spending $70,000 of my money on catering alone. Sam let out a low chuckle. She's broadcasting her own deposition. Perfect. "I want federal agents on site," I said firmly. "I want the arrest executed in front of every camera, every socialite, and every online follower she's been using to slander me. I want her caught in the act of spending stolen federal funds." "Consider it done," Sam promised. "I'm coordinating with the FBI's Miami field office today. We'll secure federal arrest warrants, search warrants for the entire estate, and asset freezing orders. We will enter during her peak moment." "Good," I said, looking out the carriage house window toward the glittering main estate. "I'll handle the grand entrance." I hung up the phone and closed my laptop. The long game was entering its final phase. Victoria thought she had effectively buried me. She had no idea that federal law enforcement was about to crash her party. On Christmas Eve, my mansion transformed into a dazzling spectacle of lights, ice sculptures, and high society ostentation. Victoria's glamorous Christmas gala was underway, funded entirely by my stolen wealth. Over 100 of Palm Beach's elite filled my ballroom, sipping expensive champagne, while Victoria's camera crew live-streamed the party to thousands of online viewers. From my carriage house, I put on a tailored dark emerald evening gown, adjusted my posture, and stood completely erect. My back was healed. My patience was exhausted. At precisely 9 o'clock, Victoria stepped onto the grand marble staircase beside a giant, decorated Christmas tree. She tapped her glass, pulling every eye and lens toward her. "Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight," Victoria announced, her voice honeyed and brimming with pride. "As many of you know, this past year has been a testing journey. Managing this historic estate while devoting my life to my dear, confused sister-in-law Evelyn hasn't been easy. But seeing all of you here reminds me why family and duty matter most." Online viewers poured in heart emojis while the crowd applauded her fake altruism. She was at the absolute peak of her performance. That was when the heavy double oak front doors swung open. Lead Special Agent Miller walked in, flanked by 4 uniformed federal officers and Samantha Cross. The live music cut off instantly. Murmurs rippled through the socialites as the agents fanned out, securing the exits. "Victoria Vance," Agent Miller announced, his voice booming across the silent hall. "Federal officers, stand where you are." Victoria blinked, her fake smile wavering for a fraction of a second before her entitlement took over. "Excuse me? This is a private charity gala for my family. You can't just barge into my home." "It isn't your home, Victoria," I said. I stepped through the front entrance, walking with crisp, deliberate grace. The crowd parted as I walked straight up the center aisle. I looked healthy, confident, and completely in control. Victoria stared at me, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief as she saw me standing tall without a cane or a walker. "Evelyn," she stammered, scrambling for control. "What are you doing out of your room? Officers, please. My sister-in-law suffers from severe vascular dementia. She's delusional and shouldn't be out here." "Save the script, Victoria," I interrupted, stepping up to the central AV control panel near the stage. "Your performance just got canceled." I plugged my encrypted flash drive directly into the main media server powering the huge wall-mounted LED screens in the ballroom. Within 3 seconds, the festive Christmas display disappeared, replaced by high-definition video feeds and forensic financial documents. The entire ballroom gasped. Played on a loop across 60-inch screens were the audio recordings of Victoria boasting about taking over my compound, the intercepted bank transfer slips showing stolen funds, and clear security footage of her paying $5,000 in cash to a corrupt mobile notary. To top it off, the live stream broadcast, still running, streamed every single slide directly to her 30,000 online followers. That is the paper trail of identity theft, bank fraud, and illegal conservatorship filing, I told the room calmly. Every dollar spent on this party was stolen through wire fraud. Victoria's face turned ghostly pale. Her hands began to shake as she looked around the room, realizing that her high society peers were staring at her with disgust. The camera crew, bewildered, kept the live feed rolling. Agent Miller stepped up the stairs, pulling out a pair of steel handcuffs. "Victoria Vance, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and bank fraud under Title 18 of the United States Code." "This is a mistake! You can't do this to me!" Victoria shrieked, backing away toward the Christmas tree, knocking over a tower of champagne glasses that shattered across the polished marble. An agent caught her arms, pulling them behind her back, and snapped the cuffs into place. The crowd pulled out their phones, snapping photos and recording, as the fake heiress was escorted down the stairs, sobbing hysterically. As she was dragged past me, I looked her dead in the eye. "You played a high-stakes game, Victoria. You just lost." 8 months later, I sat at the prosecutor's table inside the United States District Court for the Southern District of Florida. Outside, news vans lined the perimeter. Victoria's high-profile arrest at the Christmas gala had metastasized into a national scandal, holding a mirror up to elite entitlement and financial predation. Victoria sat across the room at the defense table, wearing a drab beige prison jumpsuit instead of designer silk. Her high-priced defense team had spent months attempting to stall the proceedings, filing motion after motion to dismiss the charges based on technicalities. Every single one was soundly rejected by the judge. The federal digital evidence trail I provided was simply too clean, too comprehensive, and utterly irrefutable. Faced with a mountain of intercepted wire logs, forensic bank statements, and clear audio-visual admissions, Victoria had ultimately pled guilty to federal wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and conspiracy. Today was the final act, sentencing. Before the judge pronounced the penalty, the prosecutor turned to me. "Ms. Vance, the court is ready for your victim impact statement." I stood up, adjusted my blazer, and walked smoothly to the podium. I didn't bring notes. I didn't need them. I turned slightly to face Victoria, who refused to meet my eyes. "Your Honor," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. When Victoria entered my home 8 months ago, she saw a target. She calculated that my physical vulnerability following spinal surgery made me easy prey. She assumed that age and illness had told my mind, making me incapable of defending myself or my legacy. I paused briefly, letting the weight of my words settle over the courtroom before continuing. She didn't just steal money. She weaponized Florida's legal mechanisms to strip me of my human rights through a fraudulent conservatorship, attempting to bury me alive in a back room while spending my life savings on luxury cars, private jets, and social media vanity. But entitlement is not a defense, and greed is not a strategy. True accountability requires that actions carry undeniable consequences. I looked directly at Victoria, whose hands were trembling in her lap. I do not seek revenge out of anger, I concluded sharply. I seek justice out of principle. Family is defined by loyalty and integrity, not by shared bloodlines used as an excuse for theft. She made her choices with full calculation. Now she must bear the full weight of the law. I stepped back and took my seat. The prosecutor offered a firm nod of approval. Judge Richard Martinez shuffled the legal documents on his bench, adjusted his glasses, and looked down sternly at Victoria. Mrs. Vance, Judge Martinez declared, his voice cold and unwavering, your conduct was not merely illegal. It was a cold, calculated betrayal of an ailing family member. You exploited a person's temporary physical recovery for personal vanity and financial gain. The federal court system will not tolerate such blatant disregard for the law. The judge struck his gavel hard against the wooden block. On count 1, federal wire fraud, and count 2, aggravated identity theft, I sentence you to 96 months in federal prison without the possibility of parole, Judge Martinez ordered firmly. Furthermore, the court orders full financial restitution in the amount of $620,000, including the immediate liquidation and forfeiture of all assets purchased with stolen funds. Court is adjourned. As the gavel came down, Victoria burst into tears, begging her lawyers to do something, as federal marshals stepped forward, handcuffed her, and led her through the side exit to begin serving her 8-year sentence. I watched her walk away without a single shred of regret. The rule of law had prevailed. The morning sun over Palm Beach felt different the day after the sentencing. Sitting on my back patio, holding a mug of dark coffee, I looked out over the lawn toward the Atlantic horizon. For the first time in nearly a year, the air felt clean. The noise of police sirens, court dates, and media frenzy had finally dissolved into total silence. My estate was quiet again, returned entirely to my possession. Over the following week, I systematically erased every trace of Victoria's short-lived occupation. I sold the luxury sports car at auction, directed the proceeds toward legal fee reimbursements, and hired contractors to restore the main house to its original understated elegance. I stripped away the garish decorations, the oversized portraits, and the empty champagne bottles left over from her fraudulent gala. Every room was cleansed of her presence, until the house once again felt like my home. A few days into the cleanup, my phone rang. It was my cousin Quasder from Chicago. Arthur was the kind of person who preferred peace at any cost, even if that cost meant sweeping systemic abuse under the rug. Evelyn, I heard about the sentencing, Arthur said, his voice hesitant. 8 years in federal prison? Don't you think that's a bit harsh for family? She made a terrible mistake, but she's still Victoria. Maybe you could talk to the prosecutor about reducing her sentence? I set my coffee mug down, my posture remaining relaxed, but my tone instantly turning into steel. Arthur, listen to me very carefully, I said, my voice quiet, firm, and unyielding. Victoria didn't make a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or missing a phone call. What Victoria did was a calculated, months-long federal conspiracy. She stole my identity, committed wire fraud, and bribed an official to strip away my basic human rights while I was recovering from spinal surgery. I know, Arthur stammered on the other end. It was wrong, but forgiveness is important, Evelyn. Family is supposed to forgive. Forgiveness without accountability isn't peace, Arthur. It's permission, I replied sharply. I spent 30 years in law enforcement watching people use the excuse of family to enable predators. I refuse to practice toxic forgiveness. She made her choices, and now she is facing the legal consequences of those choices. That is how the real world works. Arthur went quiet for a moment before letting out a long sigh. I understand, Evelyn. I won't bring it up again. Thank you, I said, and ended the call. That conversation anchored the core truth I had carried through this entire ordeal. In American society, we are constantly pressured to let things go, to turn the other cheek, and to prioritize harmony over justice, especially when the offender shares a bloodline or a last name. But true peace does not come from letting people walk over you in the name of civility. True peace comes from setting unshakable boundaries and enforcing them without hesitation or guilt. My physical recovery was complete. I was back to my morning swimming routines in the pool, walking along the beach, and enjoying the quiet life I had earned over 3 decades of hard public service. My estate was secure, my name was cleared, and my legal rights were permanently protected. I didn't lose anything in this ordeal, except a toxic presence that should have been removed from my life years ago. I gained a renewed clarity about what truly matters: self-respect, vigilance, and the strength to defend one's dignity no matter who tries to compromise it. As I stood at the edge of my terrace, watching the tide roll in, I knew one thing for certain. I had survived the attempt to destroy me, played the long game, and won back my life on my own terms.